super speech, and if there's anybody in this room not convinced about Nigeria, about these speeches, I don't know what you need, because that's the best. I would like now to introduce the Minister of National Planning, Minister Usman, who is going to talk to us about the framework to foreign protection direct investment. And I guess I should not, I'm sure I'm not going to be diplomatic there, but I'm going to try it. The time is going fast, and we have two sessions that are half an hour late. So as fast as you can speak, Minister, that would be super. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the Vice President, the Chairman of PDP, Your Excellencies, the Governors, other Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Some years ago, due to the chicanery of a couple of our politicians, it was the name Toronto took on an undeserved notoriety. So, in fact, in 2000, I came as Deputy Governor then of the Central Bank of Nigeria. I came on a 2-week program at the Toronto Center for Central Banking Studies. And when I went back to Nigeria, and I said proudly, I'm a Toronto graduate, a few eyebrows were raised. But I'm going to give a testimony at the end of my presentation about Toronto and Canada in particular. Now, coming after this brilliant presentation by my colleague, the Minister of Trade Investment in Nigeria, Segun Aganga, what I want to really underpin is that all these developments that you've seen taking place in Nigeria are not by accident. They're not by accident. When China was transforming, the stories you used to hear about China were Tiananmen Square, human rights, and all this. And unfortunately, a lot of the Western countries, by the time they actually discovered, most of the opportunities had gone. The thing about Nigeria is that we are one of the most misunderstood and misrepresented countries. Yes, today you hear a lot about Boko Haram, the Niger Delta amnesty, and so on and so forth. Those are the things that catch the headlines, not these detailed statistics. And I'm sure many of you are really shaking your heads and saying, is it true? Is it really true? Or because he's the chief salesman of Nigeria, is he really making up these figures? I'm here to tell you that these figures are true, but they are also the result of a deliberate effort that the country has been making to change direction in all ways. And this is represented in terms of our strategic planning, both long-term, medium-term, and short-term. This is what is producing these results. I want to briefly tell you that the broad underlying factor behind this is when in 2009 we decided that as a country we are going to really transform ourselves such that by 2020 we want to be among the top 20 countries by the size of GDP in the world. And you can see, and from some of the figures that I'll give you, that we're actually moving that way. Slowly at the beginning, but once the momentum takes on, with all the reforms that are taking place, you will see that the movement becomes faster. So quickly, I will skip through a lot of my presentations because time is of the essence. But for over 30 years of military rule, Nigeria drifted without consistent and well-implemented strategic development plans. Now, what has happened, as I said, from 2009, we crafted what we call the Nigeria Vision 2020. This obviously is not a silver bullet, but a beacon or a football goalpost. So we have a beacon, we have a goalpost that we are working towards. It sets the direction for all our stakeholders, and this is both government at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, as well as the private sector. Why did we embark on this? Some comparator countries comparison shows you that countries that have actually consistently done strategic planning in the past, such as Malaysia, India, Singapore, and Indonesia, have actually shown dramatic improvement in a number of key areas. Just taking GDP per capita and the poverty rate, you see that Malaysia was able to increase its GDP per capita between 1975 and 1999 by a factor of about 15, and reduce poverty by a factor of almost 5. India, similar figures, not as dramatic. Singapore, Indonesia. Now Nigeria, because as at that time we had only about 15 years of consistent planning, you can see what actually happened over that period was that things actually got worse. And we decided that that should not happen anymore. So what we did is we defined the vision, and this was articulated by over 5,000 Nigerians from a cross-section of Nigerian society. And this provides a link between the annual, the long term and the medium term and the short term, which is the annual budget. The key objectives we were working on is a nominal GDP of not less than 900 billion by 2020 and a per capita income of not less than 4,000 US dollars. Obviously, the fundamental aim is to improve the quality of life of Nigerians through rapid, inclusive growth and balanced development. This vision had a number of dimensions: a social dimension, an economic dimension, an institutional dimension, and an environmental dimension. I'm not going to go through the detail, but what the Minister of Trade and Investment said, focus on developing institutions, because that's how you are going to transform, not individuals, but institutions, building strong institutions. That's what makes the difference between, even in the fight against corruption. It's not that you don't have corruption in the United States, but there are institutions that ensure that if you are corrupt, you are likely to be discovered, and when you are discovered, you are likely to be dealt with through the judicial system. Those are the things that prevent people from stealing or from being corrupt. And it is these institutions that we are working on. The broad themes of the vision are agriculture and food security, information and communications technology, economic growth and job creation, education, gender issues, good governance, health, infrastructure, peace and security, persons with disability, and youth development. There were 29 technical working groups that worked around 29 key thematic areas. I'm saying this so you can see that these things did not happen by accident. We are really very strategically pursuing change over the country. Again, to save time, we also worked on a number of complementary, deeper consideration given to specific issues through 12 special interest groups. We looked at the civil service, the reform of the civil service, the judiciary, labor organizations, the legislature, media, Nigerians in the diaspora. There are some of you who are here, and you can see the opportunities that are available, because this thing is targeted at not just Canadian investors, but Nigerians in the diaspora. See what you are missing. Like President Obasanjo said, you don't have to come back home. No, but at least send the money to invest in the country. Security, traditional rulers, women, youth, and employment. Then we had two central working groups that developed a consistent macroeconomic framework. So when you see the macro progress that we are making in terms of inflation, exchange rate, the GDP growth, and so on and so forth, again, it is because of that broad framework. Then, so this is how it all fits together. Now, maybe what I should do is quickly just go through what the vision says it is, that by 2020, Nigeria will have a large, strong, diversified, sustainable, and competitive economy that effectively harnesses the talents and energies of its people and responsibly exploits its natural endowments to guarantee a high standard of living and quality of life to its citizens. But a plan is only as good as it is implemented. The vision obviously is being implemented through 3 national implementation plans. The first one from 2010 to 2013, which we are just about ending now. And we've started work on the second national implementation plan, 2014 to 2017. The key policy thrusts of the first national implementation plan are, first of all, bridging the infrastructure gap to unleash economic growth and wealth creation. And therefore, we have a lot of ministers here who are dealing with different aspects of infrastructure, with very detailed sector-specific plans that they will be discussing with any people that are interested. Optimizing the sources of economic growth to increase productivity and competitiveness. The Minister of Trade and Investment talked about competitiveness of Nigeria. Building a productive, competitive, and functional human resource base for economic growth and social advancement, and developing a knowledge-based economy. Then improving governance, security, law and order, and engendering more efficient and effective use of resources, and fostering accelerated, sustainable, social, and economic development in a competitive and environmentally friendly manner. The estimated investment that was needed is about 13 trillion, approximately 82 billion from the private sector. And from the figures that the minister has mentioned again, we are actually beginning to realize those coming. 9 trillion from the state governments and about 10 trillion from the federal government, making a total investment of about 32 trillion, or a total of about 202 billion US dollars. We have set up an effective monitoring and evaluation program. For the first time, we have a government that is accountable, that is measuring performance, and that is accounting to the Nigerian public and to the international community for its performance in terms of how much are we delivering on the vision and the transformation agenda, which is a medium-term program of this administration, of the Goodluck Jonathan administration. On coming to power in 2011, he articulated the transformation agenda, which is essentially to say what will be the contribution of the federal government to achieving the vision. The critical areas of focus of the transformation agenda, again reinforcing the vision, are good governance, physical infrastructure, human capital development, and employment, jobs, and wealth creation. In particular, the federal government is working through the transformation agenda to improve the electoral process, to transform the budget process, to deal with the security challenges, and ensure job creation and addressing critical infrastructure. The achievement of inclusive, non-inflationary growth, in particular in the real sector, is very critical. Improving rural infrastructure, encouraging large-scale industries and small and medium ones, revitalizing aging industries, emphasis on ICT, and so on and so forth. So basically, the way it's all linked up, as I said, we're doing this in a very strategic manner, is that the vision is a long-term perspective. The national implementation plans and the transformation agenda, national because the state governments are also involved. Each of the governments also articulated their own vision as part with the national vision, as an underlying factor. Now, we also have other mutually reinforcing detailed sector delivery plans. The agricultural transformation agenda, the aviation sector roadmap, the energy sector roadmap, the gas master plan, housing sector roadmap, Niger Delta master plan, power sector roadmap, solid minerals, and so on. And the relevant ministers are here to discuss this in great detail with you. What are some of the learning points from the effort so far? First of all, the overall economic performance has been really dramatic, as you've seen from the figures that the Honorable Minister of Trade and Investment. Our nominal GDP has grown from 166.53 billion in 2009 to 243.99 billion in 2011. And it is estimated to grow to about 257.42 billion for 2012, which means this our effort. When in 2009, we were the 44th economy in the world. But by the end of 2011, we were number 36. And by end of 2012, we are likely to end up as number 34. So we are climbing up the ladder already. And I think this is to show that the effort that Nigeria is making, the average real growth rate of GDP between 2010 and 2012 is 7.33%, which is quite impressive, again, as the minister has shown. So the other learning point is that we must sustain this effort through not only broad macroeconomic reforms, but also sectoral reforms, the port reforms, the power sector, fiscal reforms, procurement reform, petroleum sector reform, performance management system, agri sector reform, tax reform, education and health sector reforms, and so on and so forth. Which means really that the point is that the stories you hear about Nigeria are not really the reality of what is happening on the ground. There has been considerable progress in governance during the period, electoral and overall democratic process, building institutions, and blocking of leakages in government, which the minister has covered quite rightly. Adoption of performance management and enhancing transparency and accountability, and sustaining momentum in the implementation of the anti-corruption measures, which again the Honorable Minister has mentioned. So we are working on the second national implementation plan, and again, to save time, I'm not going to have to just give you. He has also talked about the ratings, the rating agencies, including one of the rating agencies that did it unsolicited. At one time, again, I was also, before Mr. Aganga, I was Minister of Finance at one time. And I remember those were the earlier days when people were ignoring Nigeria. We were in London talking to two of the rating agencies that had taken Nigeria on a solicited basis. And after a couple of years of rating, the third agency, unsolicited, after seeing what is beginning, the picture of Nigeria that is changing, came and did their own rating. And their own rating, independently done, is also very similar to the other two that started because they were solicited ratings. And government is committed to sustain implementation of these reforms. We are also achieving considerable success with PPP, public-private partnership. A credible framework is in place. A number of successful transactions in power, roads. You heard of Manitoba Hydro coming to manage our transmission company, and a growing pipeline of viable PPP projects. So this is, again, an area that is attractive. Now, I would like to conclude by just giving the testimony. Remember when I said I was very proud to say I am a Toronto graduate? The reason is simple. One of the things I learned when I came to Canada, at that time I was working in the financial sector, was that for over 50 years, there had never been a financial crisis in Canada. Now, show me which banking system anywhere in the world has gone through 50 years without a single banking crisis, without a single bank failing. The Canadian one is a good example. The second thing I learned is that the governor of the Reserve Bank of Canada, which is the equivalent of our central bank, governor of our central bank, Canada was one of the first countries to start inflation targeting. And once the target was set for the governor of the central bank in terms of inflation, Reserve Bank, if he failed to meet that target, under his contract, he has to resign as governor. Now, again, this is very good conduct of economic policy. The third, which my colleague, the Minister of Trade and Investment, has alluded to, is that for the first time in the UK's history, they have borrowed a Canadian to go and manage the Bank of England. So clearly, I think for me, I would say made in Toronto or made in Canada is good quality. And what we want to achieve is for Canada to come to Nigeria so that we can actually take advantage of the quality of Canada to improve the quality of Nigeria. We thank you very much.